Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, half a life. Half a life on It's All Been Checked Before. Hey, live a full life. Live a full life. Go to patreon.com/IBD and become a Patreon member of the show. That way, you not only listen to us, you can look at us and watch us. You get a little extra bonus content, a little episode a little longer. You get some tangents. We go a few more tangents than you might hear on the regular feed. Patreon.com/IBD. And follow us on Facebook. It's All Been Checked Before. Now you got a full life. But unfortunately, for some of the folks in this episode, it's half a life. And It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. Your regular crew is here.
This is Steven.
And Keith, helping to save the world.
Half a life at a time. This is Jimmy-Jerome. And I have but half a life to give. So first impressions on half a life.
Where do you even start with that? It started off a little, I wasn't sure where this was going. And I was confused in the middle as to how certain things were going to relate, but everything kind of tied up and turned into an interesting discussion, I thought. So,
Yeah, I thought the half a life thing was about the sun and this and that. But as soon as you see Luxana there, you're like, okay, this is going to be about something else, probably. But not necessarily. I mean, she's done, her episodes have been different. All kinds of different things. But yeah, the stuff I got into in the second half I thought was really interesting, whether you're talking the choice of suicide or assisted suicide or whatever, which was a big thing. But also, to me, I thought the most appealing thing, and we can get deeper in this or not, but I think it's good to have, for lack of a better term, old love or senior love. I mean, I didn't even look up the age. I mean, they're not necessarily in their 70s or whatever. Obviously, the David Ogden Stiers, who's great here, as always. His character's supposed to be.
Said Stiers.
I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong on it. He
was only 49 when he did this episode.
Yeah. So, but he's playing a guy who's 59. So, it's a thing you don't see a lot. In Star Trek you do, because if you look at, I always talk about Arthur Khan, Shatner's the age I was recently, not right now. But and he and Carol Marcus's relationship has so many layers and everything, which is why I'm so disappointed we don't see her in 3. And I've said that ad nauseum. But I think
Jill a bit about 59. She's 10 years older than David.
Yeah, and
just think it's funny you're calling that senior love because you're in that age group.
Yeah, like I said, I'm trying to think of a better term other than middle age love, whatever. But I think and I think when I say it that way, either way, it just sounds like a category on Pornhub. But what I mean is a more mature relationship, or more mature people, I guess. And
something that isn't about like Riker chasing somebody.
Keith and I'll get into this on It's All Been Star Wars before, but one of my biggest disappointments about the last trilogy, among many, was we had one scene of Han and Leia together, and I thought, man, that would have been a great Star Wars story to me. And I guess they could still do it, but obviously without Carrie Fisher, obviously. But again, of mature love, and these people have been through all these things, and yet are still together, or still have that connection, and we did have that one scene, which I thought was great in Force Awakens, but I thought we had several here. And again, usually when you see Luxana, you're like, oh, this is going to be a silly episode. And, a lot of the stuff I read afterwards was like, yeah, it really worked. And I don't necessarily agree with this, but I know we've talked about it. A lot of them were like, yeah, she wasn't as annoying here, but it's like, okay. Regardless how you feel about her, this was well done.
I find her annoying. I like her.
I do too.
But my first impression of this episode, honestly, I didn't see them as old. I really didn't feel like they were old, but maybe that's because by the time we finish this podcast, I'll be as old as that.
Well, we're not like you guys pointed out. We're not talking about people in their late 70s or 80s.
No.
We're talking about people. Well, yeah, I'm older than David.
Talking about people in their 50s, which is like halfway through life.
Yeah.
But what stood out to me about this episode is Luxana and Timson are the leads. Our regular lead characters are barely in it.
Yeah.
Shifts the focus and makes it a different episode. And I did think it worked, but that brings me right away in my first impression to the alternate episode of, did we need the Enterprise at all in this episode, or should it just, we have found a different setting and just focused on them? I mean, Luxana would have been our bridge in, our connection in, but I don't think we needed the Enterprise.
I don't know. I think that the diplomatic aspects of it, they needed somebody to rein Luoxana in for some of it.
I mean, she's an ambassador, so they could have played that a little bit differently and had her, if not her, maybe an aide or something reining her in. I don't know. I don't know that we needed I don't know that we needed the Enterprise. It could have been another starship, and I think it would have been just as effective.
Right.
You're correct in that, but I'm just saying that I think the way that they used the story elements worked out. Because I was wondering the same thing once they failed to fix the sun. Mm-hmm. And they started going on in this. I'm like, wait, why do they even need that thing at the beginning? And then it all tied back together.
Yeah.
As one of his reasons, which we'll get to that.
So we start with a Troy log, but it's only one sentence long. Yeah. And I love it. My mother.
Yes. My first note.
You're already there. You're already
the most ominous log we've ever heard.
Did she not say anything else at all after that?
No.
I thought there was just a nice long pause after that. No. And it's like you could feel her. I put that she sighed without sighing. Just, my mother is on board.
Do they say why she's there?
Not then.
Yeah.
She talked about whenever the Enterprise comes near Beta's edge, she catches a ride.
Oh.
Sees her daughter, which apparently happens to be about once a year.
We're on a run of Betazoids these last several weeks for sure.
So like my first 4 notes were about just that. Honestly, just the alternate opening was Deanna goes on to say, my mother's on board. Let's skip this one. Credits. Go to next week.
I mean, that log makes it feel like it's going to be a silly Loxana episode. It really does.
Which is, I like the swerve with that. And then, of course, right after that, the cut to Picard. Nothing else needed to be said. It was just his face coming through that door, just trying to, oh God. Yeah, just.
Yeah. So the next note I have, and this is a while later, but Timothy is introduced, and Loxana immediately gloms onto him. And Geordi's just like, that man's in a lot of trouble. And I'm like, when did Geordi start getting smarmy about Loxana?
Is it smarminess or is it? I mean, it's trouble can mean lots of things. I guess I took it to be the more innocent translation of that.
I mean, I took it as that poor man. He needs to escape.
Well, yeah.
And I enjoyed her going on the bridge when she wasn't supposed to be on the bridge, and Worf getting annoyed, and Troy getting really uncomfortable, and Riker being amused at Troy's discomfort was everything. I just said we didn't need the Enterprise crew in this episode, and we really don't, but I loved that bit on the bridge and all their reactions to her. Also wrote about this beginning of the episode. Timson is doing a lot with so little. Obviously, David Ogden Stiers, whatever his name is, played Timson. He's best known for MASH. Loved him as Colonel Winchester on MASH. Also does a bunch of Disney animated voices. He played Cogsworth in the original Beauty and the Beast, and Jumbo and Lilo and Stitch, Governor Radcliffe and Pocahontas. Has 167 credits. He sadly passed away a couple years ago, but yeah, he did Lilo and Stitch the series, The Dead Zone, all kinds of stuff.
Dead Zone, that's probably where I know him from. Yeah, I was like, I know that name, and I was like,
"You guys, a girl at Pizza Place." He was in the first 13 episodes, and then they wrote about the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the first season he was like a lead, and then they just wrote him out, unfortunately. I mean, I think the later stuff where he gets to get real emotional is even more effective because of how reined in he was at the beginning. And while that could be taken on some people as just not acting, with David Ogden Stiers, it like is really compelling. Like he does so much with so little.
Yeah, I never get that review. By the way, it is, if I'm reading this right, it is Stiers.
It is Stiers?
It's definitely not Stiers. It's Stiers.
Okay. I've always said Stiers, but I say things wrong all the time.
So at the opening, essentially what Luoxana says to Picard when she catches up to him is this, like, my daughter tells me that we need the expository information we didn't get from hearing your log. So just kind of prompting him to say, hey, what's going on in the ship? Like, why are we meeting this person?
O'Brien in the transporter room before he leaves the Troys when he locks the console. Such a good joke.
This expression on his face was everything. Just the, you know what? I'm going to get out of here and let you guys handle this.
Yeah.
But then just have we ever seen them lock the console before? I didn't know they could do that. That was one of my notes. Why aren't they doing that all the time?
Yep.
I mean, I don't think you need to do it most of the time. People aren't going to run in and be crazy. Although I guess in the original series, we had a few examples of why you should lock it. But
in this series too, I think.
Yeah. So that emotional scene in the transport room between Troy and her mother, Troy starts out speaking telepathically, which makes sense because they're upset. And so she's meeting her mother on that level. But then they switch back to out loud conversation, which did not make sense to me because I feel like when your emotions are running hot and everything, you'd probably stay in what you're most comfortable with.
By the way, if you're sad and crying telepathically, do you sniffle?
Did she do that?
Yeah, she was like, it was the voice coming from her brain was sniffling.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was trying to see if she was actually sniffling, but her actual body wasn't doing that. That was coming, or the vocal was coming from. Yeah, it wasn't a sound mix.
That was just a habit left over from voice acting. That she was doing a voiceover. She thought, "You're crying in this line. Read this." And so,
because voice actors don't really know how to act. They're not.
That's of course not what I mean, but it's just that. Yes, but
a lot of real actors don't know how to use their voice.
The context was, of course, that this was an internal discussion that wasn't taken into account. It's like when people do robot voices a certain way, and anyway, longer discussion.
Bleep, blorp, bloop, bleep, bop.
But we skipped ahead over a lot there.
Well, I didn't take notes for that first half of the episode.
Oh God, no! We need to go back to why she's even trying to get on the transporter when she was hanging out on the bridge trying to get to Timothy again. I put that it reminded me too much of my own mother when they essentially have to beg her to get off the bridge as politely as possible. I'd ask her like 2 or 3 times at least. And just like everyone was afraid to say rudely, get the F off the bridge. You're not supposed to be up here.
You can't say that to Lexi Troy, daughter of the house, holder of the house. That's heir to the Holy Rings of Beta Z.
That's where I was going, Jimmy. Keith, I don't know your mom's titles, but I bet she has some similar titles.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. I put two all caps words here. Spread it. That's what she said. She said to Mr. Hom. Yeah.
Oh,
I love Carol Strucky and his back. Yeah.
She's obviously befriending him. That was an impromptu picnic she convinced him to have in engineering, I guess.
Oh yeah.
And so the spreading out the blanket. So
only shit could get away with doing that. Isn't that when you see someplace that's only used as a workstation and somebody comes in and spreads a picnic out on it? It's got that bizarre quality where you're just like, what the F? Like
I would just be worried they would spill a Coke and then all of a sudden the warp core is shot.
I mean, if they reversed the order of these last 2 episodes, that could have been what caused the explosion.
Oh my God. That would have been great.
That would have been awesome if they're like, oh, it's that thing Mr. Hom had in engineering.
It's high fructose corn syrup.
Loxana doesn't eat high fructose corn syrup.
So I'm realizing, again, this ties into what Stephen was saying before about senior love. And that moment is more of like a manic pixie kind of character that she's playing, even though this is something that we're exploring in a different kind of phase. And my note then was, it remains to be seen if she's going to be doing more harm than good diplomatically, since she seems to have made herself the liaison for the ship in that sense. And we get the tragedy of the scientific effort not working.
I was going to say, she's established in previous episodes as an ambassador, and it takes a while for them to even mention in this episode she's an ambassador because she seems so ignorant on diplomacy and diplomatic relations.
Or at least heedless of it. So,
I guess I buy for a character a bit, but I feel like she should know a little better.
Yeah. So, they were trying to save the sun, as they were saying before. We get to all that, and I like the science of that. And I was relieved that we see him quietly resign to what has happened. He in that moment takes away the suspense and says, "I'm grateful to all of you for doing this." Mm-hmm. Still, it was just a very classy thing to do, of course. And I hate using that word, but it's just that's what it is. He didn't blame them for trying to help.
And I will say, I thought initially and again, he wears it well. I thought initially it was just like, oh man, because he literally says he's worked half his life on this or whatever. And I thought, okay, and it's a failure, and that's tough to take, but good effort. And then they come with the, oh, by the way, and now you're dead. Now you have.
This was his last chance to culminate his life's work. Yeah,
to know it. Yeah, so, and I thought that setup actually makes it his struggle even more real to me, because I was like, because I was torn too. Like, well, it makes sense he should do it. In the sense of that's how they do it there or whatever. That's what their planet does. But on the other hand, I was like, yeah, but he's got to see this through, and he can help the planet and all that stuff. So I thought that's what you want. It's a good conflict. And,
he's internally conflicted too, because he argues for his death,
right?
But then he also argues like it would take somebody a long time to catch up to what I'm doing. Like I think he sees both sides of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Going back to something Jimmy said at the beginning about how it seemed like somebody lesser might have been accused of not acting up to that point. We're seeing now in context, and even at this point, it was still confusing. Or at least I think we were led to believe that his demeanor was about this project. This is all about him being serious. I don't want to get distracted from doing this work. So you're assuming that's the reason why he's turning Luxana down, and why he's dejected at this point. It's because I failed to save my world. This is it.
Well, yeah, I think that's both. Like, you're not going to let some pretty lady distract you when you're at the apex of your life's work and your last chance to do something.
Right. And so once we realize that he's also being considerate to her, because why are we going to get started with this when I'm 4 days away from going home and dying?
Right.
It was a great, everything started to make sense in a different way suddenly.
And the other underlying thing there with their relationship is they're both widowers too. Which I think, I don't know that feeling yet, but I think that's obviously fun too.
Are you planning to murder your wife?
I didn't want to go there. It's just the way that hang there. I don't know that feeling yet, but
I think the chances of you becoming a widower in this marriage aren't high.
It's almost guaranteed for her, but not for
me. Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Widow, sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Not as long as I keep living right.
Well, first we get to the transporter scene eventually. She wants to run down there and stop everybody from killing him. Because I guess we hadn't said in this episode yet, for the purpose of for the audience who should have watched this episode, I would hope. Yeah, this is something ritualistic. Reminds me of Midsummer and some other things like that.
I wrote that down. Keith, I wrote down that this is Logan's Run ×2 or ×3, because depending on the book, I think the book they were 20 when they had to die in Logan's Run. In the movie, they were like, oh crap, we should make this 30. And then I thought of Midsummer, which essentially has the same philosophy as this planet, just much more gruesome. Spoiler alert. I don't know how they kill him. I don't know if they said how they. I
was wondering the same thing. I didn't write that down, but I was wondering. What's that?
Kill himself, so I would think you get to choose.
And maybe he Frankie Five Fingers to, again, for the second straight week, to do a Godfather 2 reference. Maybe he just gets in the bathtub and opens up those pores. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Not opens up the pores, opens up his veins.
Okay, I thought that was an even more glib way of saying that. Just like open up the pores.
A hot bath is going to open those pores.
I think
and the blood's going to come out faster.
No. You need to take some pills. Like first some sleeping pills, and then before you fall asleep, some poisonous pills. So you sleep through the poisoning, right?
Well,
or just
everybody
sit in the garage with your car running.
Not only should you have watched this episode before you listen to this podcast today, but you also should have watched The Godfather Part 2 before.
I haven't seen it.
And also listen to the trigger warning we have about suicide and so on at the beginning.
Suicide is painless. It brings on many changes.
Oh my God.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
We're going to be talking MASH.
Nicely done. That one I'm going to approve. I'm going to stamp that one. I'm okay with that one.
I adore MASH. I'm sorry. I know I'm way too young.
Me too. But I can't believe I didn't make that connection until you just did. That's great. I actually like that one.
They talk about they talk about the arbitrary age, and they talk about how at 60 you have no value. I mean, I'm not quite 40 yet, but 60 seems too young to me.
Well, I'm pretty close, and it's right on the money. No,
Britt, this brings it back to what you were saying earlier, one of you, maybe perhaps both, that these two lead characters don't seem that old. And I think that's the point of it for the episode. You need to have some sort of shock value for the audience to think, these people don't look like, I mean, they're still vibrant. They don't seem like they should be ready to die or be forced to die, I suppose.
He's a grandfather, young grandfather. And you just know after this episode's over, Loxiana tells her daughter, like, look, this guy is younger than I am, and he's already had a grandson and died. Where's my grandkids?
I'm going to, once again, for a second week in a row, jump to my alternate episode, because my alternate episode is, at 60, you have to kill yourself, unless you still look 59 or younger. then you know what? We're gonna give you a pass. Come back next year, we'll reevaluate you.
We are kicking you off this podcast when you turn 60, even though we won't be done yet. Because your opinions will have no value at that point.
Of course, no.
Yeah, that would be a great marketing tool for like all the health clubs on the world.
Of course, you guys also won't be able to mention the original series anymore either. So we'll both be 60 by then. So it makes sense. It'll be time for me to go.
The original series is about to lose all relevance in 5 years.
Shatner will still be alive. Shatner, I think, will still be king.
To go back to Keith's point, right? He made about the health clubs. Yeah, if you're going to die anyway, there's no point in getting fit. I mean, David Ogden Stiers was fat in this episode.
Well, no, I mean, if
I knew I was dying in 20 years, I don't think I'd be working out.
The contingency of looking 59 or younger. So either keep looking younger, you're going to die. So there.
Gotcha.
Well, I often think of, I can't remember who it was. I'm sure I've heard it several times. It's like, you keep working out all you want, but you're going to die. It's like, all you're doing is making a good looking corpse. That's all you're doing.
Not necessarily. I'm working out because I'm overweight and I want to live past 70.
Exactly.
I'm hoping to give myself 10 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
The quality of life too. And I've, just even last year was rough in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And
wait, what happened last year?
Oh, stuff, I guess the pandemic played into part of it, but just a little bit of weight gain is just enough to make me feel a little slower and heavier, and just some physical activities just seem more difficult. So, Troy's rescue attempt. I put that O'Brien was all of us. He's the audience in this scene, just like and leave the room. At this point, I was starting to get confused about the significance of the sun, as I was saying before, about like this whole puzzle. What's even the point of it? But then we get to Timothy going through his, you see all the different types of internal conflicts he was having. And it wasn't like Loxana just immediately turned him to wanting to live, which I thought would have been kind of cheap and a little bit too easy. But he had a combination of things he had to think about. His life's work, the culmination of it there. And it was that was the turning point when he was even saying that sentence to himself, and enough time to solve this. Wait, why do I have to die in 4 days if I can still keep working on this? You see that question happen. So he's got his own personal accomplishments to think about, and also just the noble aspect of trying to save the world, probably easier, more capably than anyone else. The planet's going to lose a lot of time, despite what the minister just says to him, which I who knows what his scientific background is to say something like that.
The minister Bartadat?
Yeah, I didn't know what his name was there, but one of my notes was just, I loved the way he played, just how perplexed he seemed about, like, you don't want to come home and die?
Yeah.
I'm
spoken like a man who's not near 60 yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Those points they bring up. And it's just, this is another, I also know this is like the second episode in a row where I ended up getting, I think, a little bit more passionate about what was going on than I would have expected. A little frustrated with the way that the characters behaving, especially when they got to the daughter coming to visit and just shame both of them.
Put a pin in the daughter. We're not there yet.
Okay, yeah.
The minister was played by Terrence McNally, who's best known for Earth Girls Are Easy, 9 to 5, and Barnaby Jones. He's got 43 credits.
He co-wrote Earth Girls Are Easy. He was married to Julie Brown. Just say Julie Brown from him.
Yeah.
No Seinfeld credit though, and this is his own track.
And while we're talking about him, I thought where he was could have been a set from Quark.
Yes, and also what were those boxes of liquid on his desk?
Because I even rewound it. I'm like, am I being unfair here? And I'm like, nope. He could be. Thanks, Chloe. He could be on he could be, and that's not to disparage the set dressing or whatever. It just seemed like it felt very like this is what they thought in the late 70s, and they still didn't have that much money to spend on it. So yeah, I found that entertaining. But
so Loxana talks to him about the parents must be paid back for the love they gave to their children.
mm-hmm.
I like to think parents aren't that selfish, most of them.
I've heard it said on too many occasions by too many different people that there's still that implication.
My dad definitely said it to us, and at some point we said to him, and I've never seen more fear on his face than when we said this to him. I said, Dad, we're going to take as good a care of you as you took of us.
That's great.
And then he laughed, but
my dad would like us to just take him out in the woods and shoot him. So,
did he ever really say that?
yes.
my mom has said that, but if I actually owned a gun, she would be like, whoa, hey, what's this?
Now, see, I don't think my dad's ready to do it yet, but when his time comes, I think he would want that. Yes.
It's really hard to tell if you're joking. You do seem.
I'm not. He grew up a farmer. He has a very different life reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not grow up a farmer. He gave that up after he became an adult. But for the first 20 years of his life, he was a full-time farmer living on a farm. And he thinks of things a bit differently than I do.
It feels like a grand understatement of some sort.
He certainly did that to pets of ours that got injured. He took them out back with a shotgun.
Wow.
When I was growing up.
Wow.
Yeah. He loves animals. He's got respect.
Right. And then they're suffering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not so, I don't know how I feel about that necessarily. It's just I guess it's just the imagery of a shotgun in particular to do it is what seemed.
I mean, what we all do today, because we're soft, is take them to the vet and let the vet give them a shot that kills them.
Right.
He handled it differently, but it's the same end result.
On cue, you might have heard Hermie sneezing repeatedly in the background. I am not going to put Hermie down. I think he's fine.
Do you need me to call my dad to come over to your house?
No.
Staying on the same subject that we were on, not that, but about the Troy discussion with Timison. It started off a little silly, and I started really getting engaged with that. Just when it started getting into the particular points of why you would do that, and it was almost like the thing you would get into with like a Purge, one of the Purge planets, or another Rick and Morty reference. Just like the when you start ranting about like, so how do people get together and decide this exactly? I want to know more about that process, and how gradually that came on, and just how they arrived at that specific age. How do people age on their planet? What was their life expectancy? Like, what point in history would this be equivalent to on Earth, or a first world country on Earth?
1950s, 40s.
Because I think in Midsummer, you're just like, well, these people are crazy, even though they're not really. I mean, they're dealing with the same exact way as these guys. I know my dad used to always say, this is the other thing he used to say, which was, supposedly the Native Americans, when their older people felt like they'd outuse their usefulness, they would just walk out into the woods and just die there. And that's the way he wanted to go. Yeah. But I'm such a narcissist, that'll never happen.
You get halfway out to the woods and change your mind and go back.
I can't die. What'll everyone do?
Well, there's still new episodes of Star Trek coming.
I was about to say.
I was going to say, by the time we finish doing all these, it will have been half of my life. So, yeah. We got a long way to go.
At this rate, I will be much older than you when we finish. So, much older than you are now, obviously.
Exactly. Yes. Of course.
I was going to say, I mean, back in the 40s or 50s, and even probably up until like the 1980s, I mean, what were you going to do anyway? I mean, now we have like all this streaming. And if I'm sitting around in a retirement home or wherever, or if I'm even lucky enough to do that, who knows? There's plenty of stuff like that. I mean, I can't imagine what I would do if I had to go like another.
Yeah.
Well, 50,000 new shows, and they're still streaming Dick Van Dyke reruns,
right?
Or the original series, whatever.
Yeah. But I'll do my 30th rewatch.
But yeah, you go back to even probably in like 1990 something. That was it. I mean, I guess no. I mean, by then they had VCRs and DVDs and so on. I'm saying like even before that though. I'm like, all right, well.
But
at some point, I'll be watching the Menagerie and talking to people the same way Captain Pike does.
Yeah.
Are you hungry? Boop.
That too.
Do you want me to turn the TV off? Boop, boop. I'm not that far from that now.
When Loxana was telling the story about the Betazoids having the big wigs where they put a live animal in the wigs, and then somebody decided that was dumb and they weren't going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Did anybody else think she was talking about herself as the person that decided it was dumb and didn't do it anymore?
Didn't catch it.
I think that, but that makes sense.
She never confirms it, which makes me think it's not her, because I feel like she wouldn't be able to stop herself from bragging if it was her. But either it was her and just for once she had a little decorum, or it was somebody she's modeled her life after and looked up to, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Deanna.
It was not Deanna. It wasn't in the book Imzadi. It wasn't Deanna. So when Timothy comes up to the bridge and they're having the discussion with the minister and everything, and the minister's like, you got to give him back or I'm sending the warships and all that. Why is Dr. Crusher up there to escort him off the bridge? That felt like, oh, she's contracted to be in this many episodes. We're going to give her a line here, even though there's no reason for her to be here.
Yeah.
And does it make sense to send warships just so this guy dies?
This is where I started thinking about a lot of things like that, as far as they must be warp capable, right? I mean,
yes.
Why not just have them leave the planet or exile them or something? But
because it disrupts society to change.
Right.
Yeah.
They mentioned Prime Directive though, right?
Yeah.
That's why Picard can't interfere.
Yeah, because she
unless he directly requests asylum.
Yep.
Oh,
he did.
And because Loxana says that's your Prime Directive. I was like, that's a nice workaround she found there.
I love that line where he says, though, alive, I'm a greater threat than the dying sun.
Yeah.
It's that idea is more destructive. An idea can be destructive. Yeah. They would rather kill him to preserve their society than let him live to save them from the dying sun, is what they were saying.
Just insane.
He's the greater threat.
Yeah. For me, a lot of this is still going to come down to a lot of what Troy and Timothy were talking about, as far as it seems so arbitrary and the semantics of it. And just, I mean, I could see some of the logic in what they were trying to accomplish, but at the same time, why 60?
How much of our society is arbitrary and dumb, though? And we still do it.
Yeah. Do you think they would have, when they put him, they were sent him up there to do what he was going to try and do with the sun? Do you think they were you know what? He's 59 and 300. Well, I don't know how many days they have on the planet or whatever, but he's however many days he's this many days, our days from 60. It
was 4 days.
Do you think he's gonna get squirrely about it up there? Should we maybe send somebody else with his stuff?
Somebody else with a discreet laser pistol?
Yeah, I mean, I'm were they now you're gonna come back and kill yourself either way, right? Oh yeah. I already picked out the gun. It's loaded already. Yeah, don't worry about it. In fact, I brought it with me just in case I get stuck on their ship. I'll kill myself there.
Well, see, I don't think they were thinking about that, because the way the minister reacted to Timothy refusing, trying to get out of it, he acted like, who would even think of that?
Yeah.
It's so ingrained in them that this is just what you do.
Yeah.
That's not a consideration they're going to take into account.
I thought that was a really important aspect of that scene. And that's what just really is, wow, that really came home then.
And they talk about how xenophobic the race is. So it's not like they've had a lot of people exposed to outsiders and getting those ideas. This is kind of a unique situation. Now they're going to be much more careful the next time they send somebody out. But
right.
So I guess we're up to the daughter thing at this point.
That was my next note. Michelle Forbes as Dara.
It just seemed, this is where I started getting upset, just this whole discussion with her. And I guess I'm glad in the way that they didn't really they didn't really make it as blatant as her being like, but we had this party all planned. And we paid for the decorations and everything. And how dare you do? It wasn't anything quite that shallow. It was still that kind of ingrainedness. I learned it from you. You were a big proponent of this, as my father raised me to believe this. How could you do this? When she started getting into burial spots and things like that, and just when she started objecting to the idea that he was not going to die there as opposed to just anywhere else in the universe. I mean, why should it matter to her that he is going to leave and do something else? She's not going to see him either way. but it's like this. She's trying to justify thinking about him as suffering in some way, and even bringing it back to her suffering of just thinking about the idea of it. I guess to me personally, those kinds of things shouldn't matter to people as much as they seem to, even in our culture.
So the way I read that scene, this is not being hung up on the specifics of the instance, but it felt to me like a scene we've seen in movies that were made 20 years ago about a father that has left the mother and come out as gay at age 60, and how that has now blown up that child's worldview and everything they thought. And that's how I read the daughter's reaction. She's humiliated. She's ashamed of him. It's not something she can accept. A
shame. Yeah. She actually used shame for both of them. Yeah.
So like you were going on and on about the specifics of it, which I get. I do get it. I shouldn't have interrupted you. I'm sorry. But yeah, I wasn't looking at the specifics. I was looking at the emotion of the moment. And I could see that relating to something. I mean, I'm sure there's something else now we could say that's equivalent. But the gay thing comes to my mind because we saw plenty of examples of that when gayness wasn't acceptable. Like something that so blows up your worldview and something you'd never think about that person you love. Plus, she was played by the wonderful Michelle Forbes, best known for the California, spelled with a K. Escape from LA, True Blood, Hunger Games.
Yes, of course. That's why I was, once you said California, it all came home because there's so many other things like that you mentioned. I was like, yeah, of course, because she was like one of the 4 people in that. Sorry. Go ahead.
Prison Break, Battlestar Galactica 24. She does have a Seinfeld credit.
She does. She was in the Big Salad episode. She was George's girlfriend. She's the one who hands Elaine the big salad, and Elaine says, "Thank you." And then George gets mad at her for acting like she delivered it. And then when she finds out, Julie is the character, then she breaks up with George. So you just had to have the big salad. Yeah. I like it there. I like the way they do it there.
And what most Star Trek fans know Michelle Forbes for is playing Ro Lauren, who is a major reoccurring character next season on Next Gen. So they must have liked her so much. They bring her back next season.
Oh, cool.
She's been 8 episodes in the last 3 seasons of Next Gen. Most of them next season, but she's in 1 each in season 6 and 7 as well. And she was originally supposed to do the spinoff with O'Brien. They developed Deep Space Nine with her as the first officer.
Oh, wow.
And Michelle Forbes at the time said, "I don't want to get pigeonholed in a role. I played Ro for 8 episodes. I don't want to keep playing Ro." So she left she did not do Deep Space Nine. She's not in DS9 at all. But there is a very similar character to her Ensign Ro, who is the first officer in Deep Space Nine. Same species, similar character. And you see exactly where it would have been her. And they went a slightly different direction with her. But I just think it's funny that so close to where she's about to debut her big Star Trek character, she's playing this totally unrelated. Like we're talking early next season, and this is the late this season. Wow. So I liked her hair, though. That's my only fashion note.
Fashion. I have a lot of fashion notes, but yeah, you answered the question I was going to ask. Is that a hit or a miss?
I mean, I don't think it's sexy. It's not something I'm like, ooh, I want my wife to get that hairstyle. Right. But as like an artistic creation, I enjoyed it.
It's definitely unique and different. And yeah, so my other fashion notes are Lwaxana tells Deanna, well, if you would just dress for a man. I was like, where have you been this season? That has not been an issue. Not an issue this season. Speaking of which, I thought her clothes were great, especially her final outfit. I thought that was sexiest. Well, no, that's not true either, because Magel's been very sexy throughout her appearances on TNG. I'm still always going to be partial to Nurse Chapel, but everyone knows that.
But Lwaxana radiates sex. Chapel doesn't. So there's your difference. Yeah.
Ogden Stiers, I liked his clothes. They were weird, but I was like, I think I would wear those. I think I would wear his weird blue and black. It looked like somebody took a still photo of an episode of Wipeout, if you guys know that show, and then was like, all right, I'm going to put that diagram on a piece of clothing.
The game show, like one of those American Ninja shows? Yeah,
it's where the geometric things are coming at them and they have to try and avoid it. I think it was a Japanese show, and then it came here. My ex-girlfriend loved that show.
I liked the makeup they did with him, even though you could see the outline of where they applied the makeup.
once again, Jimmy, you are anticipating my next question, which is that what everyone on their planet has, or is that just him?
We saw his daughter had it to a lesser extent.
And so the minister.
Okay. And so that's just David Ogden Stiers having a lot more bare head to show.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay.
It's very similar to the alien look of the Trill that we're going to be introduced to soon, which are there's a main character Trill in DS9, but we'll be introduced to the Trill in Next Gen. Similar style of makeup job. This was almost like a rough draft of what the Trill's going to look like.
Again, it was a nice thought.
Well, it made me think of something else through the discussion about Michelle Forbes and her decision around then. You have to wonder, like, what the practical considerations were for her at that point. Mm-hmm. Was she not a fan of the character or the series or the genre? Because it's hard for me to imagine right now in this day and age. Maybe it wasn't enough money. The idea of not wanting to be pigeonholed into a role like that. What did she think was going to happen? I mean,
so I think at that point, the original series actors did kind of get pigeonholed. And the Next Gen, I know Patrick Stewart was hesitant to do the series for the same reason. You don't want to get pigeonholed. And she was still pretty early in her career. She'd done 29 episodes of Guiding Light, of a soap opera. And then she had just a handful of other credits, including California, before this. So this was like, she's getting a little bit of success. She's getting cast in things. She got a reoccurring role on a primetime show. Then shortly thereafter, she got the Seinfeld guest spot. I can see her thinking she'll go on to bigger things. And to be fair, I mean, she kind of has. She's got, she only has 72 credits, which I thought it was more because she's only in so many things. But a lot of those credits are reoccurring or lead roles where she's done long arcs on things. And they are a lot of sci-fi stuff, but I would not say all the characters she's playing are just like Ro Lauren. I think she's showing a breadth of talent. I really like Michelle Forbes. So
yeah, and I think at this point, this is before Shatner became all these other things he's become in our time.
Yes,
and Nimoy had been directing some movies, but even he hadn't become the bigger person that he is now. And George Takei was not George Takei. He was Sulu, and now George Takei's this whole other thing. On top of that,
it took him a long time to do it, though. I think all of them. I don't think Nimoy ever really, as far as acting, I can't really think of anything else I would associate him with.
I think you're right.
I am not Spock.
His bigger person, yeah. Mm-hmm. He wrote I Am Not Spock, and then he wrote I Am Spock.
Yeah. I've read them. They're good books.
Yeah, and part of Shatner's thing was like, you know what? I am Kirk. Yeah. And good and bad. So he leaned into it. So, but yeah, so I think that makes sense. Nowadays, I don't know. I don't know if the people on Discovery are like, oh, I'm going to be pigeonholed. They probably aren't.
I don't think so.
No,
especially when you get somebody like Sonequa Martin Green or Doug Jones who have already had these huge careers.
Right.
Not only that, I think that it's just something different in this day and age. Mm-hmm. Again, it's maybe that in itself would be success. I mean, I don't know. For one of us, I mean, what do you think, Stephen? Would a Star Trek recurring role of any sort, would that be your goal finale? You'd be like, okay, this is it. This is the last act I need to do. If this is it.
Yeah, I think the way I've always worked, I would be like, oh, you want me to keep coming back? I'm going to keep coming back till this thing's done. So.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of actors who would be happy to be pigeonholed, and there's plenty that wouldn't. I mean, if you're just trying to make a living, you get a show like this, you can do conventions the rest of your life. But if you want to be an actor and act in a lot of different things, then I could see her fear at the time, even though I still think it was a mistake. But that being said, I love Not a Visitor, who plays the DS9 role. So I guess if Michelle Forbes had done it, we probably wouldn't know Not a Visitor.
And there's so much more content these days, obviously, than there were in.
Well, and with the newer shows where you only do 10 or 13 episodes a year, you film Star Trek for a few months, then you still have a lot of time to go do other things. Whereas back in Next Gen days when you're filming 10 months a year, not the same thing.
Yeah. Like I started noticing around the Buffy era, when you have like a WB and a CW and things like that, all those actors seem to start spreading out to similar things in similar genres. And you're once you're on the Sci-Fi Network, you're in a lot of things on the Sci-Fi Network. And the same sort of thing seems to have happened for like Netflix movies and generally lots of other things like that. So even if you were pigeonholed in this one series, it seems like they kind of like the actors carry each other to all these other things that are sort of tangentially related anyway. So
that's a great point. Back to the episode. When David Ogden Stiers decides to die, and he tells Loxana, loving her is almost enough to stay alive. That feels like a little bit of a slap in the face to her, right?
I hadn't thought of it that way.
I know he means it to be touching, but I almost love you enough, but not really, so bye.
There are definitely situations where that would be a really, really terrible thing to say.
If we grade on a curve and put it in terms of their society, it's pretty romantic. If I were to say that to Marianne right now, probably not.
Yes.
I mean, this would be a great out if you wanted to break up with somebody. Hey, it's just a thing we do. I have to kill myself. Can I be there? No. But do you not love me? Oh, I love you so much that I would almost not kill myself, but I have to. So,
so is that the alternate episode? He beams down. There's not really a death party. It's all
it is now.
My God.
Get away from Roxana.
We go back to the beginning. He's actually like texting his daughter and the minister to play along with them when they call to say,
"Try to save me from this woman, please, anything." That's the comedy version of this episode, though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Wow.
And then, and at the same time, Loxana's like, "Whew, I'm glad he went and killed himself because I had to put on a good show, but thank God."
Oh no, she was infatuated with him.
Oh, I know, but in my mind, it's just like, oh no, I was playing along. I'm glad he moved on. Picard, where are you? Or Tarsus. She goes and finds Tarsus.
I liked the two of them as a couple.
I did too. I loved
it. She only is attracted to men of a certain type, like of power or intelligence or whatever. They have to have like big strokes. And he had that, even though he was quiet and reserved, because he was like this really big deal scientist for his people.
But don't have to have a lot of hair.
No, and you don't have to be skinny, and you don't have to be. But I thought they had a really nice attraction and chemistry. Yeah. Probably because I do think Magella's really good in that role. Mm-hmm. She's decent as an actress overall, but she's really good in that role because I think she's kind of playing herself to a certain extent. Yeah, and he's great in anything. So when she goes with him at the end and she promises to be good, that was a great exchange. I only have one issue with that final goodbye scene, though, and that's that she calls O'Brien, because there is no effing way Loxana took the time to learn the transporter chief's name. Just no. I don't buy it.
Did she look into his mind and was like,
she could cheat that way.
I'm the transporter officer. That's just all he thinks all the time. Like he refers to himself in the third person.
Could be that you may have found a plausible explanation.
A couple of things about that very final scene. I like their suitcase toolboxes. I think I've said that before. I like the way people travel light in the future. Mm-hmm. Now, when she decides to go, is she going to be like the stepmother at a funeral?
Yeah. Yeah. All these people are like, why is she here? We don't know her. She's not part of this. What bewitching spell has she put on my dad?
She did not RSVP. We didn't get enough food for the after event.
She's just here for when we divide up his stuff after the ceremony.
I hope you didn't sign anything, Dad. Or I hope you did sign something. Yeah. When they shot into the sun, I forgot or missed that it was a test on some other sun, not their sun. Because when it blew up, I'm like, oh, didn't you guys have a contingency?
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh, they did. That's why they did this. That makes sense.
I totally missed that. I guess I just thought, well, that's their son and it's done. I didn't really process.
Timothy sounds like Anacin or some kind of drug. Take twice daily. Timothy, take twice daily, but only under the proper care of a doctor. We already addressed all this, but I just thought the whole episode was a nice end around to talk about ageism, aging, and late life romance and everything that goes into that. Not to mention assisted suicide, obviously. Near the end of the episode, Deanna's in there, and Loxana calls her little one. We've talked about before. And they have her way in the background, standing next to David Ogden Stiers. And maybe I looked this up before, but maybe I haven't. I'm like, is she like 5 feet, 5'1"? She's 5'5". But David Ogden Stiers is 6'4". So I'm like,
wow.
That makes sense. And then, Frakes is like 6'3". So that all makes sense. It's like, oh, she's so tiny. It's like, she's not that tiny. 5'5" is pretty good height for a lady.
Oh, the only thing I didn't cover. This episode was directed by regular director Leslie Dow. Story by Ted Roberts and Peter Allen Fields, and then Peter Allen Fields did the teleplay by himself. Ted Roberts is music editor. That's what all his IMDb credits are. Especially, he was the music editor for all the Perry Mason TV movies.
Oh, yeah.
This is his only writing credit. So he branched out of music editing.
And
Peter Allen
Stiers
Fields
was on a bunch of the I'd say the old Perry Masons, the newer Perry Masons, even though they're old. But yeah, sorry.
Peter Allen Fields, however, this is the first of 3 episodes he'll write for Next Gen. The other 2 being Cost of Living, which sounds like it might be something similar, and The Inner Light, which is often mentioned as the best Next Gen episode. I mean, there's a few up there, but Inner Light is considered like really, really, really good. And then he ends up writing, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 episodes of DS9, including my favorite Star Trek episode of all time, In the Pale Moonlight. Oh, he's just got story by for that. But In the Pale Moonlight is not just my favorite DS9 episode, it's my favorite Star Trek episode. So
is that in any way connected to the quote from
too.
what?
I think we were saying the same
Yeah.
thing. It's a great Batman comic, too.
Is that in any way related? Yeah. Any way related to the quote from the Batman movie?
Yeah.
The Pale Moonlight.
Oh, you ever dance with the devil in the Pale
Pale
Moonlight? Definitely. I mean, is that from Batman?
Yeah.
Well, no. You said that there was a title of the episode called "In the Pale Moonlight."
Right.
I wonder if that was in any way connected to the same source of that quote or something.
I mean, Dance with the Devil is definitely part of the main plot of that episode. So I'm guessing. Yeah, when I look up that quote, it says Joker. I'm not seeing it being somewhere else. Maybe
that is very strange.
Maybe they did get it from Batman. I had no idea.
It's also from that Prince song, Bat Dance. So.
Interesting. I'm going to have to do some more research to find out if they really did do it as a Batman reference. But it is about somebody doing something really bad for the greater good.
Strange.
And the morality that comes with that. So that's why I love it. I think it's just such a good episode. Anyway, ranking. Who was your annoyance this week?
The ambassador. The home planet ambassador. Oh, I have one more question about him. In fact, he signs off without touching anything. I think we've talked about this before, maybe. Did he just think, end this? Or because he's just like, blah, 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 and it says transmission ended. But he didn't move, didn't touch anything. He was sitting there like this or whatever, however he was sitting. So,
are you sure he didn't put his fingers in the water?
Maybe he blinked and like his assistant ended it. So maybe that's what it was.
I'm going to go with him too. I don't feel like there's another good candidate.
Yeah.
Well, I met Timothon's daughter.
Really? See, I think her behavior is understandable.
I tend to get annoyed by a lot of emotional behaviors that are understandable under the circumstances, but still bother me from a distance. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
From a quote unquote objective perspective.
Oh, who do you want to have a drink with?
Keith's annoyance.
I can see that, but
I'll just stare at her hair the whole time. But
I'm going to choose Timothy, but really, just like last week, it's really the actor I want to have the drink with.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have a drink with David Ogden Stiers if he wasn't dead.
Yeah.
Like probably Timothy the character, actually.
Yeah. I guess I should specify on here that I'm choosing the actor.
Of course, then again, there's Michelle Forbes, the actress, because I would want to ask her the same question that I asked you. Do you think that? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the decision? Was it the right thing or not?
So I would really like to have a drink with Michelle Forbes, the actress, as well, for multiple reasons, both the professional and the personal. But I think David Ogden, I'll have a chance to choose her later. And David Ogden, this is his one Trek. So, and also just in this episode, he was killing it.
Oh, so good.
Let's see. Where do we want to rank this? I don't think we need to start as high as last week. Better or worse than Cupid?
Ooh.
Only slightly lower.
there are some similar aspects if you think about it.
I know, that's why I think
good job again.
That one's more fun, but there's still like a doomed romance thing. Oh, yeah. And Vash was a great guest star. Loxana and Timson are great guest stars.
This is where I think the substance would come into play again to maybe bump it up above.
I think I'd go above as much as fun as I had with Cupid.
I am torn because, I think the rewatchability in Cupid's better, but...
Yeah, there's nothing fun about this episode.
No, but I would watch this episode again easily.
I would too.
I mean, the beginning was fun.
Yeah, the beginning is fun, yeah.
So Cupid was 2 weeks ago. Above that's last week's The Drumhead. I think the morality and the complexity of the drumhead's better, but this episode doesn't have the weak points that one had. So that's where
I wouldn't fight going above, but I wouldn't emphatically say it has to go above that.
I think all things being equal, I'd probably go below, but barely.
Yeah.
First Contact's above the drumhead, and I wouldn't go above that.
Yeah, and I think that gets to whether it's rewatchability or whatever. Yeah, which I think First Contact had similar issues, but it also pulled together a lot of different aspects, and also had very right now relevance. So yeah, I'm okay with this spot for it because I wouldn't call this episode exciting. It was gripping. It was thought-provoking is probably better.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say it was like, oh, what's going to happen? But I mean, I was touched by it, but I don't know if it would be, and I don't know how you may, somebody's probably, I know many people have done it, maybe just not in a Star Trek episode, to make that, it was gut-wrenching for decision for our guy. Yeah, how could I forget? Timothy, Take Two Daily. So, I mean, their connection was great and their relationship was great, but it still wasn't the same as if we'd been with somebody we knew longer. Stuff. But no, to get back to the ranking, I think that's a good ranking. I'm not.
You convinced me with exciting as opposed to thought provoking, where I think the other two were a little bit more had a little bit more of that conflict that was driving it as well.
Keith, can you believe that Brothers has been bumped all the way down to number 11 out of 20?
Nope, I cannot.
It was not my favorite.
No, but I still think an episode like that I wouldn't expect to be so low.
Yeah.
Next week, the host, Dr. Crusher, falls again for someone who's not at all what she expects him to be.
Spoiler, it's Wesley. No, that's awful.
I know.
Now I'm going back a week. For those of you who were here last week, did Tarsus, and obviously he wasn't, but I felt like he was a very similar character to Wesley, and he was kind of the young ensign who's kind of a little nervous or whatever.
Yeah.
Although Wesley would have been much more confident answering those questions. He definitely would have been like, I'm not a Romulan. My grandfather wasn't a Romulan, so he probably would have been okay. So sorry, everybody, I took you back to last week. But
it looks like the host will introduce us to the Trill, who I just mentioned, except they don't have the makeup yet to make them look like the Trill that we'll come to know. Based on what I'm seeing, it looks like a totally different makeup job. That's more foam pieces instead of paint splotches. Interesting. We'll have to wait and see. Till then, live long, unlike Timothy.
Yeah, I mean, until you're 60.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time.
It's a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
And prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?